Hey everybody, Mike Huseman here. Glad to have you on Off Season After Dark, episode 5. So we had the intro episode, and now we hit our 4th conference today. We are back in the power conferences. We started off with the Big Ten, as you may remember, then went to Mountain West, American, and now we are in the ACC. Here with me is Alec Nederveld, one of my former coworkers with Mike Farrell Sports, and a Syracuse guy, which many of you regulars who have seen me on SEC After Dark will enjoy that connection, because I get a lot of you talking about Fran Brown, Elijah Robinson, the former Georgia, Texas A&M connections, now at Syracuse. So, Alec, glad to have you here. Tell the audience a bit about yourself, what you specialize in, what your interests are, and where they can find you.
Yeah, of course. First, thank you, Mike, for giving me this invitation, giving me this opportunity to talk some ACC with you. I first met Mike probably 2.5 years ago now, working with Mike Farrell Sports. I was there about 2 years, started just as a writer, did some editing as well. Moved away from them somewhat recently, and I've got two main things now. I am with the Syracuse fan-sided site, Inside the Loud House, and recently I started up a YouTube channel of my own, mainly video essays and a weekly show, somewhat similar to what this could be. Not trying to compete with you, but gotta get the shout out there.
Yeah.
You can find me on Twitter at Nederveld CFB, and the YouTube channel is Shades of College Football. Mike, if you could put those in the bio, that would be great. Get some quick access to that. Sounds good.
Yeah, I will. With the Twitter stuff, I'll link all that, and then on YouTube, in the bio description, I'll tag you with all that stuff.
Perfect.
So, those of you on Twitter, you'll be seeing this July 2nd, Wednesday morning. So on YouTube, you may get it a day early. But I feel like ACC is a fun spot right now, Alec, because in looking at the head coaches, where we'll start, I looked at all the head coaches, and I saw ranked lists on Athlon, and I kept looking at names and thinking, that guy should be higher on the list. That guy should be higher on the list. But I also kept finding myself saying, you really can't lower many guys, which tells me it's a pretty strong conference coach-wise if you're continuously saying everybody should be higher on the list and you're not lowering anybody. So this is the list I pulled off of Athlon. I think no surprise, Dabo's going to be number one. I don't know that anybody can argue with that. I agree with Jeff Bromett too. Some people may not, but after that, I feel like there's a lot of different ways you could go with the head coaches on this list. Mario, I mean, they kind of had a meltdown last year. Lashley, they were ascending last year, had a great year. Norvell was great up until last year, where they were awful. And after that, we see a lot of known names, but, could be in a lot of different places, I feel like. What are some things about this list that stand out to you? What takes do you have about the list?
Yeah, I agree with your point on just how deep the ACC is with coaches. I'm looking at Manny Diaz at number 10 right there.
Yep.
He won, 9 games at Duke in his first year, and he's the 10th best coach in the conference. I know that he wasn't amazing at Miami, but come on. They
were 9-4 last year, yep. 9-4.
9-4 at Duke, and with the 10th best coach. You have Bill Belichick is very interesting. He is such a wild card, being arguably the greatest coach in NFL history, but has never coached a down of college football. That's just such a big adjustment. You have no clue if his NFL experience will translate. We don't even know how much of what he did with the Patriots is because of him, because of Tom Brady. I am sure it's a mix of both, but we're going to see what he'll do now with who's their quarterback going to be? Gio Lopez.
Gio Lopez from South Alabama. Yep.
Yeah, it's a big difference there.
Yeah. My guy, to your notion there about the guy that should be higher, the guy right ahead of Diaz, Pat Narduzzi. He's been there 10 years, won over 70 games, went to 7 bowl games. Last year, they were above 500, and they were poor the year before, but that's coming off of an 11-win and a 9-win year. They've had a lot of stability at Pitt he's been pretty solid all around. I feel like you could put him a lot higher. The same with Dave Dorn. I've praised Dorn a lot in my writing for Farrell in that NC State has been ultra stable under him. They rarely drop off. They're always playing stout D, good in the trenches. But again, who are you going to drop? Brent Key and Belichick both might be a little high for me on this list, but there's a lot of good coaches here.
Yeah. Going back to Narduzzi, they were 7-0 at the start of the year, and their season kind of flipped on its head once they lost Eli Holstein, who he's going to be back. He is a fantastic quarterback. Look, I really thought Pittsburgh was going to be dead to rights. I thought Narduzzi, he's a guy that might have been fired just because of how bad 2023 was. I didn't see a lot to look forward to in 2024. He turned it around. He has got himself back in a good position. Dave Dorn is just, like you said, model of consistency. They just feel like a team that's going to go 7-5 and 8-4 every year. Maybe NC State fans are a little upset that they haven't taken that next step. I was all in on NC State last year. I thought that they were going to win the conference. Casey Concepcion was supposed to be fantastic. Grayson McCall, obviously that didn't turn out the way they expected, but Dorn still salvaged the season, and that's something that should be commended.
Yeah, they're one of them, as consistent as he's been. This might be the year I have the most doubts about NC State, largely because I don't know what to think of CJ Bailey. I have questions over whether he can be a winning QB in the conference, but who knows? Maybe they can get it done. And Bill O'Brien is a guy who's had a lot of success too. And, with BC, he's here at 11. That dude went to a Penn State job that was awful, and he did well enough where he got an NFL job where he won the division most years he was there. He was a really bad GM, but he was a really good head coach when he was in the NFL.
Yeah, I agree. I think just Northeast football as a whole, with Boston College, with Pittsburgh, with Syracuse, is definitely on the rise because you have three very good coaches there.
Yeah.
Bill O'Brien's a guy that I don't want to see Syracuse play very often. He's going to have Boston College playing traditional Boston College football, great defense, great offensive line, just running the football. He's a guy that he's going to get the donors for Boston College supporting them just from his time with the Patriots. He's got experience at Alabama and Ohio State too as offensive coordinator. He's going to be a fantastic coach. He's just give him another year or two. He's going to rise up that list.
Yeah. We will see a fun week 2 non-conference game when Boston College goes to Michigan State. We might learn a lot about those teams who, we have some questions about going into the year. And surprisingly enough, for being mostly an SEC show and we're a group, although with me, I'm covering all of them, we've talked about Fran Brown a decent amount. And Corey, our Georgia guy, is a massive Fran Brown fan. Thinks that he'll be, destined for potentially an SEC job if that, opens up with his Georgia connections there. Tell our viewers here why they should be interested in Fran Brown and what he's bringing to the table at Syracuse.
Look, first things first, I do not want to hear that man going to the SEC.
No.
When he was hired at Syracuse, he said that he's going to stay there. Obviously, coaches say things all the time. Just keep that man in Syracuse. Our AD, John Wildhack, please keep him around for a long time. But yeah, he is fantastic. It starts with what he does on the recruiting trail. He's just a genuine, no BS guy. He's going to tell it like it is. He has his background. He was from Camden, New Jersey, not a very good area at all. He came out of there. He played at Western Carolina, went to the NFL for a little while, and now he's just gone back into coaching. He's a player's coach through and through. He is trying to set his players up for life after football as well. This may just be because I'm in somewhat of a Syracuse echo chamber where I don't really see what some of the things these other coaches are doing. But Fran Brown, he's trying to make sure every single player they get a job after graduation. If they're not going to the NFL, he's trying to teach his players about personal finance, try to invest some of that NIL money, trying to work with the community, clean up, stuff like that. Just from that perspective, what he's doing is fantastic. It's working out on the recruiting trail. Syracuse under Dino Babers before Fran Brown was recruiting maybe like 60th in the country on average. Getting a 4-star was a momentous occasion, something that would happen I don't know, maybe once every 2 or 3 years. Fran Brown has completely switched that trajectory around. He's recruiting in the 30s right now. I believe the 2026 class is 26th, and that's a
big
huge
jump.
upgrade.
That's a big jump in only your second or third, recruiting cycle now.
Yeah. Brown hasn't been able to connect on any super big names yet, but he's got Syracuse in contention for 5-star wide receiver Calvin Russell. He's committing, I believe, this Saturday. That'd be a huge get. I don't think Syracuse will get that done, but just being in contentions for a 5-star wide receiver, a Miami legacy from Miami, Florida. There's really no connection there other than Fran Brown and the way he's sold this program.
It's the Russell, the one I'm thinking of.
Turnaround.
Was his mom also a basketball player at Miami? Is that the one I'm thinking of?
Yes. Yeah. Miami legacy. Michigan still in that recruitment, LSU. Yeah. So there is a lot of steep competition. Florida State, Florida. Again, I don't think Syracuse will get that done, but just being in conversations with a guy like Russell, who knows what's going to happen to him at Miami or wherever he ends up. Maybe he has 1 or 2 seasons, he transfers out. Syracuse should be on the top of his list. Maybe he can continue that career. It's what he's doing is so amazing on the recruiting trail, and he has a result on the field, more importantly, to back it up. 10 wins in his first year. You can say whatever you want about what the schedule was, and it wasn't particularly difficult, especially compared to what this year's schedule is going to be. But you win 10 games. That's something that's only happened one time since, I want to say, 2002. He did it in his first year. He completely turned around the program, brought in Kyle McCord, the nation's leading passer, when Syracuse really didn't have a passing game all of 2023. It's so impressive what he's done.
Yeah. Their season opener will be a fun game, playing Tennessee Vols in Atlanta. That should be a game where, both teams coming off of successful years, but we'll have a lot of new guys. And another Syracuse guy with SEC connections I've written about a decent amount, and we've talked about, it's Elijah Robinson, the D coordinator. He was at Texas A&M, ended up being their interim head coach when they had let Jimbo Fisher go. He's also a New Jersey guy, played at Penn State, and is also a riser in the game, younger guy who I think has a bright future ahead of him as well.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of what I said about Fran Brown, I can say about Elijah Robinson. Again, fantastic recruiter. His defensive line was pretty good. The defensive unit as a whole, this is his first time being defensive play caller, I believe, and you could definitely see some growing pains there. Give him another year or two, though. He's a guy that could definitely become a Power 4 head coach, or maybe a Group of 5 head coach. On the other side of the ball, Will Nixon is the offensive coordinator. NFL guy. He has experience with the Philadelphia Eagles mainly. I believe he's with the Giants for a little bit as well. Yeah, fantastic game planning, building the team around the strengths of Kyle McCord and the wideouts. He's a guy that he was in contention to be the Houston Texans offensive coordinator. He was in contention to be, I believe, the Temple head coach, maybe the FIU head coach as well.
Both of those guys were mentioned in that Temple job. The FIU one I didn't know about, but that makes sense.
Yeah, just give him 2 to 3 years, and he's probably going to be a head coach at a pretty good school.
Yeah, another Penn State guy like Robinson is too. Nixon, I know, was a running back at Penn State. So many of our NFL fans may remember he was a longtime Carolina Panthers assistant coach as well. Nixon was. So even getting lower on this list, Justin Wilcox is a guy I don't want to say he's on the hot seat, but they've been remarkably below average for a while. I think he made a lot of good hires this year. Brian Harsin will be their O coordinator. Nick Rolovich is on staff as well. They, I think, need to do something to keep their jobs potentially. Jake Dickert is a guy I like a lot. I was a massive fan of that hire. Coming from Wazoo with the uncertainties of their conference future, thought Wake Forest hiring Jake Dickert was a very good move on their part. And I don't think this year we'll see much out of Wake. It's going to be a multi-year project like it was for Dave Clawson, but I did like the Dickert hire.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Dickert, he turned Washington State from really an afterthought into a very good team. They were ranked most of the season.
Yeah.
Yeah, what he did finding a quarterback in John Mateer who lit up the country, really. He was one of the top transfers in the country for a reason. And I think that Dickert, he has some experience working at a program that doesn't have the same resources as its competition. There's a lot of negative recruiting you could do to Washington State. Same thing you can do to Wake Forest. And
Yeah.
Dickert's going to have those guys rolling, I think, in a couple of years.
Yeah. And one thing with Dickert that I notice it always is something that I keep an eye on. At Wazoo, he hired quite a few coaches who then got poached by bigger schools. It's tough to lose those guys, but it tells me he's good at identifying people if that's the case.
Yes.
And that's going to be more important as you get into a power conference in a place like Wake where you're going to be talent deficient compared to the rest of the teams. That's a big deal for them.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Getting lower on this list, Brent Pry, it's tough to say there's a bright future there. I mean, they had the most returning production on offense last year and just could not put it together. I'd expected more out of, Kyron Drones. Putin was a good running back, but as a team, they were below 500. They fired both of their coordinators, which tells me Pry probably had to do that to keep some of the Wolves at bay. But I think if they don't win probably 8 games this year, he might be the guy that is showing the pink slip. How do you feel about the Hokies right now and him?
Yeah, I was going to plan on talking a little bit more about Brent Pry and Virginia Tech later. I'm not big on Brent Pry at all. He can't win close games. That's just what it is. I'm pretty sure his mark is 1-13 in one possession games in 3 years at Virginia Tech. That's just not going to get it done.
No, that is not.
And it gets to a point where, he's got Virginia Tech competitive, but I wonder if a better coach can flip some of those losses to wins instead of going, I believe 7-6 and 6-7 the last 2 years. He could go maybe 8-5 and 8-5. That would have Virginia Tech in a much more optimistic spot. And I agree with you. I was very high on them last year. I thought with all that returning production, they definitely figured things out in the second half of the year that they would just be a better team. And we didn't see that. And I am with you. This might be the last year of Brent Pry. I think the big thing is if this university has the money to pay to fire him, and pay for the buyout.
And one thing that is not helping him is their schedule this year is pretty tough out of the gate. They got South Carolina and Vanderbilt as their first 2. So to their credit, they're scheduling SEC teams. This might not be the year they wanted to do that, though. So Phil Montgomery is their new O coordinator. He is a known person, was Tulsa's head coach for a number of years, a former Houston Baylor Art Briles guy, where he had a lot of success coaching Robert Griffin. That was over a decade ago, and he had Briles doing a lot of that too, who, for all of his negative stuff and scandals, was a tremendous head coach. So with Montgomery, we'll see. And then on defense, they brought in a guy named Sam Seifkes, who had been in the NFL for a while, was with my Minnesota Vikings as an assistant for a while, and was with the Cardinals last year. So, that's kind of Virginia Tech. Next on the list at 16 was Tony Elliott, a guy who, I tell you, I'm kind of turning a page with him. They were not good his first year. They won 3 games. They then had the tragedy with the shooting on campus. They were bad before that, but then they won 3 games the year after. Last year they got it up to 5, and it was tough to say a lot of good things about him, but they kind of turned it around to some extent, especially early mid-season. They got some of those early wins to build momentum. They finished poorly, losing their last 3, but looking at the portal guys Virginia got and their schedule this year, they could win some games, I think. got about as easy a draw as you can in the conference schedule-wise. I mean, they don't play Clemson. They don't play Miami. They don't play SMU. That's pretty fortunate when you're looking at the conference schedule. And I also like the Chandler Morris acquisition in the portal. He was very good at North Texas. He had been at Oklahoma, TCU before that. Of course, his dad was the former Arkansas coach, Chad. But Chandler was a good addition. And Virginia also got other good, guys in the portal. Ross, the receiver from JMU. So we've seen them do some solid things. What are your thoughts on the Cavs this year? And Elliott?
I did not really love Tony Elliott. I didn't think it was the most inspired of hires, especially after they lost Bronco Mendenhall, who was fantastic for a number of years there.
But I had him number 1 on my Mountain West head coaching list a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, it's honestly perfect. Maybe number 2 behind a guy like Troy Calhoun at Air Force, maybe 3 behind Danielson at Boise. But he has been so good for so long, and just losing him was such a big deal. You lost some of your assistants as well under him, and Virginia had to figure out something different. Took a couple of years with Tony Elliott, and I still don't think I love him as a head coach. I wouldn't say I love Chandler Rogers either. I'm wondering how much of his success was the system he was in at North Texas under Eric Morris, is it?
Yep, Eric Morris. And Chandler Morris. There was a Chandler Rogers, or that was the year before. They went from Chandler Rogers to Chandler Morris. We're on Morris now. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I remember him. I thought he was going to be starting at Cal last year before Fernando Mendoza took over.
Yes,
that's besides the point, though.
That was Rogers.
I do think that Virginia will be decent. I think it'll be enough to keep Tony Elliott's job. Maybe a 7-5 campaign, 6-6.
I think so.
Berth to the military bowl, maybe.
Yeah.
It's progress. It'll keep his job around, keep Elliott making a couple $1 million a year, and who knows what'll happen from there.
They're one of the teams for those of you out there who are looking at preseason over-unders. They're one of the teams I'm smashing the over on, because I think their win total is projected at 4.5. They're going to go way over that just because the schedule is so favorable. I think that I like them to hit that number. And last on our coaching list was Frank Reich, who, odd to say that we would have a former NFL coach who has won a Super Bowl as a coordinator last, but it's such an odd situation. They fired Taylor so late in the year. The roster is not very good compared to the rest of the conference. And, knowing he's a lame duck, I don't know if that's good or bad, because it sounds like there's zero incentive for him to get the job long-term, not, really on the table, but he's going to coach for a year. They're going to get a full-time guy. I don't have high hopes for the Cardinal this year, but Reich probably is as good as you can do for a one-year interim situation.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And if Stanford still had Troy Taylor, that's a guy that I was really high on with him coming out of Sacramento State.
So was I.
I don't know if he'd be any higher, maybe 16 instead of 17, but he has been massively disappointing at Stanford. And we'll see if Frank Reich can turn the program around. Doesn't sound like he will, though.
Yeah, and they're also a team who their schedule is decently tough. They have non-con games at BYU, and Notre Dame is their last game of the season. So the schedule's not doing the Cardinal any favors. I'd be surprised if they make a bowl game, but I have been surprised before. So any last thoughts on the list?
I think just there's 3 coaches that I would think of more as NFL guys: Bill Belichick, Bill O'Brien, and Frank Reich. It's very interesting to see Belichick and Bill O'Brien in the middle. Bill O'Brien, especially, actually having college experience, and you have 2 guys who have never coached college, or if they have coached college, it's a very minimal. Belichick at number 7, Frank Reich at number 17. it almost feels like you're looking at where the programs are at too, compared to just the coaches, because Stanford's in the gutter.
Yeah, and that's kind of my thing was with those three guys. The formula for how they did this is kind of confusing to me, because if you're having Belichick that high, who's never coached in college, what you should also have Reich higher, who is successful in the NFL. You should also have O'Brien higher. It's like we decided Bill was going to be high because he was good in the NFL, but then we're not giving O'Brien and Reich credit for them being good in the NFL.
Yeah. And again, Bill Belichick was absolutely better than them. He won 6 Super Bowls for a reason, but
absolutely, yeah,
it's a completely different game between college and the NFL, especially now more than ever when you have to deal with contracts, and you got to deal with the NIL and transfer portal. Maybe Belichick's actually better than that because he worked with contracts for a while. I believe he was GM, at least towards the end.
Him and O'Brien both were for a good portion of their NFL time.
Yeah, and Belichick definitely did it better than O'Brien, but I don't know. I think that is kind of unfair towards O'Brien and Belichick.
One guy we kind of glossed over but shouldn't have, number 2 on the list, was Brom at Louisville. I'm a massive fan of his. I think he's a fantastic coach. Very few coaches have won at Purdue. I did an article on that, going back 30 years. Him and Joe Tiller, they're only 2 coaches with a net winning record. And for Louisville, getting him to come home where he's an alumni, I think was a massive gift. And also, he's a guy who I think a blue blood team could end up targeting. But because he's an alumni there, you have a realistic shot of keeping him at Louisville. So for Louisville's sake, hopefully they can do that. And they are a team with the changing landscape and expanding playoff. I think in the next 3 years, we'll probably see Louisville as a playoff team at least once, just because they're going to be near the top there.
I would agree with you. Won, I think, 10 games in year 1, 9 games in year 2. Fantastic offensive mind. Gets the most out of his players pretty much every year. He has switched up his philosophy. Went from, towards the end of his time at Purdue, what I remember is just pure air raid. They couldn't run the ball, but you have Aiden O'Connell throwing it for 500 yards a game. Now at Louisville, you have a fantastic duo of running backs led by Isaac Brown. They're going to rely on them, and you still have Miller Moss. You still have Ja'Cory Brooks is back, right? Alabama transfer.
I'm not sure about Brooks, but I know Colin Lacey and Chris Bell both are, and then Dakari Collins, the transfer from NC State and Clemson, is also there. So that wide receiver,
you still have some good weapons.
Absolutely. And that O-line, they beefed up the O-line in the transfer portal a lot too. One of the guys for them, McKalen Pounders, was a good O-tackle at Mississippi State. They brought him in. And then Nair Jackson, guard from Florida International. But it will be another good addition for Louisville. So that. And with the Brooks one, I should know the Brooks answer, and I don't. So I'm a little ashamed of that.
I should.
Another solid coach in this conference who I'll briefly talk about before we move on, Rhett Lashley. And I want to mention him, because they got to the playoffs last year, but also he's one of the most interesting guys for me looking forward to next offseason, because I think there's a good chance we see a head coach opening at Arkansas, where Sam Pittman is at. Lashley's an alumni there, and former assistant coach there as well. I would guess if SMU has any success this year, which I expect they will, Lashley will be the first guy Arkansas will call to see if he wants that job. Going home, going to the SEC, that's, for a lot of people, that would be a no-brainer. I don't know in his case if it is, though. SMU has a lot of resources. They will pay whatever it takes to keep him, and you're going to have a better path to the playoff most years. It will be a hell of a decision for Rhett Lashley to make, I think, if and when that happens.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. SMU, you're going from a spot where SMU is probably in the top 3 for booster support, for what he could get from a contract, compared to Arkansas, where Arkansas, they have money. They've got the Walmart family. They don't have – they're always going to be at least towards the bottom in the SEC, though, most years, just because of the level of competition you have. SMU, you can recruit.
you hit it there. Like Arkansas, they might be top 25 nationally with that stuff. You're at best 8 to 10 in the SEC, though. Like, you're not going to be near the top.
Yeah, I agree. What Lashley's done very well is just keeping Texas guys home. You are right in Dallas. You are and possibly the greatest hotbed in the country for college football talent. You can keep guys home. You can get guys to come back home in the transfer portal. Maybe like a 4 or 5 star that went to Alabama, just didn't pan out. Send him back to SMU. Give him a second lease on life. I think he's just in such a good spot. He's going to be well paid. He's going to get the facilities he wants, just knowing those donors that I'm not sure he's going to want to leave, especially where you go from a spot where everybody loves you to a spot where you lose a couple games against some very good teams and you got the fan base with torches and pitchforks at your door, you know?
Absolutely. And it's one of those, Sam Pittman, he's done okay. He had the 9-win season, but really before Pittman, it's been a long time since a coach there has just out and out succeeded. Probably Petrino, you could argue, then got ran off by the scandal, but Brett Bielema was great at Wisconsin, went there, was terrible, now was good again at Illinois. Like, it's a tough spot to consistently win games at.
Yeah.
And I think Lashley is smart enough to recognize that. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Let's transition now to the quarterbacks of the ACC. And I'll ask you for Alec. Would you want to talk about all the ACC guys or the top portal QBs first?
Look at the top. Let's look at all the ACC quarterbacks first.
Here we are. So this list, College Football Budge is who I got this list from. It's a good Twitter follow for all of you out there. This one was unique. I looked at a lot of different lists, and this one was a nice visual. A lot of them, everyone I've seen had Klubnik at 1. A lot of them had Haynes King at 2. This one has King at 3, Kevin Jennings at 2. But with this, I would have Holstein higher. I'm not as big of a CJ Bailey fan as this guy is. To me, we runs around well, but we didn't see him, throw it as much as we could have. But at the top, Klubnik, can't argue with him at 1, right? I don't think there's anybody else you can have at 1.
I agree.
Yeah. And then who would you have it to? Would you have King, Jennings? But who would you put second if you had to?
I'm going to put a guy that is criminally underrated on this list. I'm not saying I love this guy. I rooted against him a lot last year. Carson Beck. He is not the 6th best quarterback in the ACC. He was fantastic at Georgia 2 seasons ago. He is still pretty good for the most part at Georgia last year. Put him in the ACC. Put him with the weapons that Miami has. I know they're losing a lot. They still have a lot on their roster. They have a fantastic offensive line. He's going to do great things. There's no reason why he should be number 6 right now.
Yeah, I don't know that I would have him at 2. I would have him a lot higher than he is, though. I'm also a big Darian Mensah fan. I think that was a really good get for Manny Diaz at Duke. Mensah was awesome at Tulane last year. And ironically, those 2 teams play each other early in the year. But to me, it's there. Any number of QBs could be number 2 on this list. So I think your back one is a good take. Heck, based on you would mention this, when he was healthy last year, you could make a case that Holstein could have been 2. With Cade Bell as their old coordinator, they were awesome. But a lot of things I'm seeing have King at 2. You get down the list. Kyron Drones has, I would say, not lived up to the potential. He's been okay, but there have been people who've expected him to be that, elite guy. And if you would have put this list out a year or 2 ago, asking in 2025 who's going to be the top QBs in this conference, everybody would have had Drones 2 or 3, and he's not even close to that at this point.
Yeah.
Like, the growth just hasn't happened.
Yeah, I agree with you there. He actually, I'd say, regressed from 2024, and there's really no reason to think that he's going to have this crazy development this year going into a senior year now.
Yeah. Dylan Lonergan at BC's Alabama transfer. So a guy that Bill O'Brien knows. I don't believe they overlapped except for on the recruit. I think he was recruiting.
Yeah, definitely recruited him.
Then left. So that tells me something that O'Brien believes he's a guy for that system. Some of these ones lower than this are not updated. Gio Lopez is going to be North Carolina's. He's going to be way higher on this list than Max Johnson or Ryan Brown, who was since portaled back to Purdue. But Lopez will be higher. And then I think Chandler Morris wins the Virginia job. I mentioned him earlier in this episode. Yeah. He's also a guy I would have higher. Is the Syracuse job a battle with Agnelli and Collins, or is Agnelli going to be the guy?
I think it's going to be Steve Angeli. It is still a battle for now, though. So this is a very interesting quarterback battle. So Ricky Collins transferred in from LSU in the winter. He was named the starting quarterback. And then we had the whole thing happen with Trevor Pena leaving. Some of it was definitely NIL related. Some of it also, I think, was a lack of confidence in either the offensive scheme. He didn't think he was going to get the ball enough in a senior season, or just the quarterback getting him the ball in Ricky Collins. So Syracuse adds in Steve Angeli, who I think is more of a Kyle McCord-esque quarterback, more of a pocket passer. Obviously, we still have fall camp to figure out the job, but I would lean 80% that Steve Angeli is going to be the week 1 starter.
That's a good take. I appreciate that insight there. It's one of those where I assumed he would be the guy, but I haven't really talked to anybody with any knowledge at all of that job. Wake Forest, we were talking about Dickert before and the improvements there. This is the one position where I have doubts. I was at South Carolina when Robbie Ashford was a backup there. He is well-traveled. He was at Auburn. He was at Oregon. He can run around well, but he does not throw the ball effectively. So I have my doubts about that quarterback situation at Wake. Deshaun Purdy, who was at Charlotte last year, is also on the roster there. Wouldn't shock me if he ends up being the guy over Ashford, but that remains to be seen. We don't know a ton about that job. And Stanford is, again, another school. Elijah Brown, it looks like, will be the guy, but there's another battle going on there. I will say one thing for whoever wins, the Stanford QB is listed as last on this list. Whoever gets that job, at least with Frank Reich, you will be well coached as a QB. So that's one benefit to that position for whoever gets that job. Now, if that guy plays 1 year and then portals somewhere else with a new head coach, we don't know. But you'll at least be well coached for a year. Yeah.
So 2 things to add to this list first, Mike. I've got a theory. This is really a shot in the dark that I haven't heard anybody talk about. But Jake Retzlaff has gone from BYU now. He's going to he wants to be a Power 4 starting quarterback this year. I haven't heard any teams that would be interested in him. Why not Wake Forest, though? Retzlaff would just be a 1-year guy. Yep. I am not very confident at all in Robbie Ashford or Deshaun Purdy. Why not go for Retzlaff? He is a proven FBS starter. He was in the top half of the Big 12 last year, led BYU to 11 wins. Let me hear if you have something to say about that, Mike. That'll shoot me down.
Absolutely ecstatic you brought that up. So first episode of this show was guest Thor Nystrom, longtime friend of mine, a guy, collaborate with him a bit. But he and I were talking on the phone a couple days ago about where Retzlaff could end up. And for the P4 spots, that's one of 3 where we said he would absolutely be the day 1 starter. Wake was what the other 2 were Kentucky, because Retzlaff would beat out Zach Calzada, and Oklahoma State. And Mike Gundy's really struggled to find a QB the last couple of years. And I think that's, that was the 3rd job where I feel like he definitely from the get-go, is going to beat out. And that they liked Zane Flores as a recruit. We haven't seen him play much, so maybe they like and know more about Flores at Oklahoma State. Yeah. But those were kind of the 3 Power 4 jobs where we said he would be the guy day 1, and it's, he wouldn't get beat out. Another one we mentioned where it could be up in the air. He would compete at Purdue with Brian Brown, who's on this list at UNC, was at Purdue last year, portaled to North Carolina, portaled back to Purdue. Retzlaff could be a guy there. My thought with Purdue is, if you're Barry Odom, Purdue was so bad last year, maybe you don't want to be bringing in guys right now and you want to build what you had in spring. I don't know. But I think Wake is a fantastic option for Retzlaff if they're looking for a guy. I'm with you on that one.
Yeah. And then the other quarterback that kind of just glossed over, sitting at number 5, Miller Moss. What do you have to say about Miller Moss, Mike?
We talked about him episode 1. I was much higher on him than Eric Froton, one of our other guests, who was one of the top college fantasy guys in the country, but also is a Southern California guy and is around those guys a lot, goes to a lot of the Elite 11, the big camps and stuff. He was way lower on Moss than I was. So that tells me something, because he's usually not wrong about these guys. Said the arm strength is a big concern there. And I like the get for Braum. And I thought if you're Moss, that's a great spot to go. But other people that know more than me about him were lower than I was. So I will say that. But me, myself, I thought it was an okay get for Louisville.
Yeah, I think he's going to be better than Jake Plummer, who they had 2 years ago, who they won 10 games with. Yeah. Probably, he might be better than Tyler Shuck, who they won 9 games with last year, second-round draft pick.
Certainly will stay healthier than those guys did, because they couldn't stay on the field.
Yeah, I think he could be.
Plummer wasn't that bad about being injured.
I think that 5 spot's pretty good for him. Mm-hmm. And yeah, he's a guy that I don't think he's smart with the football. Yeah, maybe he's not gonna throw for 300 yards every week, but he can step up in some big games, especially if teams are gonna have to load the box to stop Louisville's run game. They have some good weapons too.
Yeah. One guy we didn't talk about who I feel like will either be higher or lower, Thomas Castellanos, now at Florida State, was at Boston College last year, portaled to the Seminoles when Gus Malzahn got the job. I don't think he ends the year at 14. He's either going to be way lower and terrible or way higher if they have a good season, because they're going to run the ball a lot. We more or less know that with Gus. They want to get back to being more fundamental, tougher in the trenches. So either Castellanos will play himself out of the job and won't be good, or he'll be way higher on this list because he's going to run for more touchdowns.
Yeah, I agree. I was not a huge Tommy Castellanos guy.
Neither was
I really don't like the way he's talking right now. He's got Alabama motivated, and they want to shut that guy up. They're probably calling him a midget and saying the midget's not going to throw for 100 yards against us or something. That's a very dangerous game to play, and if things don't go very well from the beginning, well, we saw what happened with Florida State last year and how bad it can get. With that being said, though, Castellanos has a lot of raw talent. He's a guy that Gus Malzahn always liked. He recruited him to UCF and recruited him back to Florida State. If he can harness, if I trust one coach in the country to harness a running quarterback's talent, it's going to be Gus Malzahn. He could do some good things. Yeah. He might honestly be a guy where he's more of a fantasy option than an actual good quarterback, just because of his rushing upside. We'll see what happens there, though.
They're one of those teams where I really feel like, similar to, I had this talk about Southern Miss G5 wise. There is no way Florida State is as bad as they were last year. They can only go upward. Like they're not going to be a 2-win team again. So how many more wins? That's the question. We don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I find it impossible that they're this bad again. The only way that I guess it could happen, I could see a similar season, is just they get demoralized at the beginning of the year again. The fan base turns on them once again, and they're not even playing for anything. They're more than talented enough to be in the top half, probably a top 5 roster in this conference, maybe even higher than that. But if you can have a top 5 roster, but if they're not playing well, they're not playing hard, it doesn't matter.
If that doomsday scenario happens, I don't think we see Norvell finish the season. We probably have Malzahn or Tony White, the new D coordinator, as the interim head coach at that time of year.
Yeah, I agree.
We have also, shame on me probably should have given Kevin Jennings a little more credit. He threw for 3,200 yards last year, went to the playoffs, 23 touchdowns. Kevin Jennings was a pretty good QB last year, going into a year where we didn't think he would be the starter. We thought Preston Stone would be. Struggled early on. Stone is now at Northwestern. Kevin Jennings had a good season last year, as did most of their team.
Yeah, I agree with you. He's a plus runner as well. Brings a lot for defenses to worry about. He's going to be very good for them again as well. I don't know if I'd have him as number 2. I'd have Carson back. I'd say I'd probably put him at 4 behind Haynes King as well.
Yeah, that's probably fair. For me, him and Mensa would probably be in that 3, 4, 5-ish range. So that's a good point. But I'm going to show one of our visuals now that we had earlier in the year. But looking at the top portal QBs, we see a good ACC influence here. Carson Beck, they had as the number 2 portal QB. Sagapulatea, forgive me, listeners, if I pronounce that wrong. I did my best at Cal. Mensa right after him going to Duke. Miller Moss not far behind them, Louisville. So we're seeing a good ACC influence here. And we've, other than, the Cal situation, we talked about all those guys quite a bit right here. And then the next, group of QBs here. Gio Lopez, so I would have Gio Lopez a lot higher on this list. I think he's a pretty impressive QB. Devin Brown, I think, will be the Cal guy. Was at Ohio State last year. We've seen him run the ball a lot. Haven't seen him throw much. So Brown being able to throw the ball for Wilcox and Harsin there will be a big deal. Castellanos, you did a good job mentioning him. And then we have the 2 Syracuse guys who you did a great job talking about earlier. So a lot of turnover at QB in the ACC, but I think it'll be a fun conference to watch that position develop.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. So one segment we kind of incorporated last week, and then the first episode was for our college fantasy listeners. Who would be one fantasy sleeper in the ACC that they should watch out for? Do you have a guy?
So I had 2 names that I came up with. One's going to be a little bit more of a sleeper than the other, the more I think about it. The first one I'm going to say is Mark Fletcher. He was the number 2 back at Miami last year behind Damian Martinez, who was a 1,000-yard rusher. He's in the NFL now. Ran for 600 yards, 5.4 yards a carry, 9 rushing touchdowns, which is big. He's a power back. He's got great size. And I think what Miami's going to do a little bit more this year, they're losing Cameron Ward, obviously. They're losing some good receivers. Xavier Shepo is the main man. They have a very good offensive line. They have a head coach that he loves the offensive line. He's probably going to be more inclined to running the ball too, especially in the red zone. I think Fletcher's a guy that he's going to become the number 1 running back for Miami. They will still rotate guys around, but I think he's going to get a lot of red zone work. I think he's going to get a lot of touchdowns. So it'll be good pickup for fantasy drafters this year.
Awesome. Yeah. So one of my ACC portal sleepers, another running back, Terrion Stewart, now at Virginia Tech. They brought in multiple portal guys. They also brought in Selden from Tennessee, Braden Bennett from Coastal. But Terrion Stewart was at Bowling Green last year. I think he largely can fill those Bashal Tootin shoes, who was fantastic last year as a college fantasy player. We know, for all we were talking about Vatek before, they are going to at least attempt to run the ball a lot. So I think Terrion is the guy there who I would lean towards as my running back sleeper in the conference. And then receiving sleeper wise, I struggle a little bit more with this one in conference. Lewis Bond at Boston College was the guy that I kind of landed on. The targets there it's tough to say who's going to get them, but in looking at where Bond's potential is and some of his, metrics, I think Lewis Bond at BC is a guy who could be one to at least take a flyer on in your drafts later on out there. So
yeah, so I've got a second name as well. I didn't really want to bring him up at first, so you guys don't call me a homer, but I'm going to go with Justice Ross Simmons at Syracuse. Look, Syracuse slung the ball all over the field last year. A lot of our top pass catchers now are gone to Jackson Meeks, Trevor Pena, Rondé Gatson. They combined for nearly 3,000 receiving yards. They are all in the NFL draft now. Quinn Allen, 500 yards is running as a running back. He's gone as well. Look, there's a lot of production to fill. Darrell Gill Jr. is the leading receiver for returning players, and Ross Simmons, he had a slow start to the year. He was a spring transfer from Colorado State, had some injuries in the fall, and never had the season that we expected him to have. But I think now he's going to have a full off season, where he will be ready. He's getting major wide receiver one reps. I think he's going to be our ex wide receiver. I think he's going to have a very good season when all things are done. Probably going to be our wide receiver one, maybe number two, but he's a guy that is not going to be drafted very highly at all.
Okay. That's a good take. Yeah, Ross Simmons, very good name there. One thing I will mention for our ACC people out here who are the college fantasy players in overall, all positions, all power conferences, we are seeing Desmond Reed, Pittsburgh's running back, typically rated as the 1 or 2 overall guy. So he definitely would be the conference's top overall guy in terms of average draft position. We are seeing him go extremely high. He runs the ball well, catches the ball well, especially in that Cade Bell offense. Reed is going to be an elite player fantasy-wise, or should be. I know there's some debate on if he should be one. He's still going to be really high. Any way you slice it. So that's our fantasy takes. Now I'm going to show, this visual is just giving us kind of a ballpark of post-spring playoff projections. So last year, most of you probably don't need this refresher, but we saw 2 ACC teams make the playoff. Clemson was the conference champ, and SMU got the final at-large spot. It will be interesting this year if the ACC gets 1 or 2 spots again. I would lean towards 2 probably. I think even though last year they got 2, the Big 12 only got 1, it's probably going to be the norm that the power conferences get 2, that they get 2, between each of them. So who do you like in the conference to make the playoffs? This one lists obviously Clemson as conference champ having a bye, and then Miami is an at-large.
I think the ACC is only going to get 1 team into the playoff this year. I'm not entirely sure if there's going to be more than 1 ACC team that gets to 10 wins this season. I'm not crazy high on Miami. I'm not crazy high on SMU with a tougher schedule. There's a lot of pretty good teams. Georgia Tech and Louisville will fall into that pretty good range. But when I look at playoff level teams, top 12 teams in the country, I only think that'll be Clemson. They are returning a lot of talent, and I think that they're going to split their 2 SEC games with LSU and South Carolina. They could honestly win both of them. They look to be the best team in the conference by a pretty good margin, and
absolutely
their team that they could probably be top 5, maybe 6 or 7 at the lowest by the time we get to the playoff, and they will be a pretty well-seeded team.
Yep, I've said this a few times, but not that Clemson is going to win the title or be number 1, but going into the season, they have the best odds of anybody of making the playoff. Because looking at the conference dynamics and all the teams, the likelihood that they make the playoffs is extremely high. So I think them making the playoffs is the best bet of any individual team. Their defensive front is going to be unbelievable. Klubnik's coming back. They don't really have a weak link position-wise if you look at the roster. And that roster is good. I mean, there's not much more I can say about them other than they're going to be competitive, and whether or not they win the title, they'll be a contender, I think. And your take about them being the only one, that's an interesting one. I haven't heard a lot of people feel too strongly one way or the other about that. SMU, they'll hope they can make a run at it again. I think for Miami, if Miami doesn't make the playoffs, it's probably disappointing for them, because if you're Mario, you were brought in to do that specifically. They don't care about, winning 9-10. They want to go to the playoffs, and they really had a meltdown last year and losing those 2 games late to not make it. That, is something that will be considered unacceptable to them this year. I like Louisville. I talked about Braun before. They got one of the tougher schedule conferences, though. They go to Miami, they go to Pitt, then in back-to-back weeks in November, they have Clemson and SMU. So Virginia avoided a lot of the tough teams. Louisville's playing all of them. So we'll see how that goes for them. I don't know. What, in terms of not ACC, but rest of the teams, what other playoff takes do you have? Mine is in the Big Ten. I don't think we see anything new. I think it's kind of business as usual. I would expect Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon to all be playoff teams. The Big Ten might not get a 4th team like they did last year. I don't know. I think Indiana is good. I don't expect the drop off like some do. I don't know that they win 10 or 11 though to go to the playoffs again. I think there might be a little regression, and teams aren't gonna take them as light as they may have last year early on. Illinois is going to be better. I don't know that they're at the level of a playoff team, though, and we're seeing a lot of people have them as, a sleeper playoff team, a team that could be at that level. They're good, but I'm not as big of an outlier fan as some are, so I don't know if Illinois is at that level yet. Michigan's good. If Michigan's playing Underwood, they're a year away. They won't be a playoff team playing a true freshman the whole season. What Big Ten wise? Big Ten wise, what are your playoff thoughts?
Looking at the Big Ten, I think that I would lean towards 3 teams, being Ohio State, Penn State, and Oregon. If there was a 4th team, I would have to lean towards Illinois. If anybody could make a surprise run behind Illinois, I think Indiana would be the most likely, although I don't see that. Maybe USC can make a run, maybe Nebraska in the 3rd year of Matt Rule. Like, Matt Rule's done so well at pretty much everywhere else in his 3rd year, but it does seem pretty unlikely. And as much as I hate to say this, it just feels like a year where the SEC is going to dominate in the playoff. I think that they could probably end up getting 5 teams in there. I don't think the ACC is too strong. I don't think the playoff committee is going to want to get another team in the ACC or the Big 12 after seeing what SMU did last year. It just seems like the SEC is just going to get a bunch of teams in there.
Well, one of my takes there is you mentioned a few, like if Nebraska could be a surprise team, Indiana. And I wrote about this for Farrell a few weeks ago. A surprise team in that sense, I think, out of the Big Ten to look for is Iowa, especially if Mark Gronowski plays well as a portal QB. They always win a lot of games. They're super consistent. They have a very high floor. And the schedule that they do play Penn State and Oregon, but a lot of their other tougher games are at home. So I think if we're having a surprise team, Iowa could be one to look for. Whether they make it or not, I don't know. I like I said, I think only 3 Big Ten teams make it. But I also think your point about Matt Rule in year 3 is a fantastic one. He always gets him playing a lot better. His teams are steady growers and usually hit their stride by then. So you talk about SEC getting quite a few teams in. Let's talk about that. For me, it's tough to move past Texas and Georgia. Seem like the obvious ones. I don't think Georgia is going to be elite this year. They still probably win 10 though and make the playoffs. They're so talented. They're so deep on defense, both sides of the trenches. We're not going to see much regression. Same with Tech. Texas is so talented all over. Are you in agreement that we don't need to talk about either of those two a ton and that they're probably playoff teams?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you there. They are pretty much givens unless really we have a disaster scenario. Maybe they're losing maybe they lose 3 or 4 close games. Maybe they have some injuries, whatever it may be. I don't foresee that happening.
Yeah.
Moving on, though, we got to get 3 more teams in there. I think we see the return of Alabama to the playoffs. 12-team playoff. I just think they get in. They have so much talent on the roster.
I'm high on LSU this year. I think with Nussmeier coming back and that roster looks pretty good. LSU's a team I expect to be solid this year, and they have a lot of skilled guys there. They do have to replace some of the O-line. Defensive-wise, they're also looking good. I wouldn't be surprised if the Tigers get in.
I think LSU is going to be around that 8-4, 9-3 mark. If they get to 9-3, that might be enough to get in.
Yep.
I'm also going to say South Carolina is going to be a playoff team this year. I
hope so.
Love Lenore Sellers.
That's the alma mater. Go Cox. Yeah.
Yep. And then additionally, it could be, there's just going to be one more team that they get to 9 wins and they sneak in as the 11 seed maybe. It could be LSU. It could be maybe Texas A&M, maybe Florida if everything goes according to plan there. I just
could
think
be Ole Miss. I think it could be Ole Miss too. They're going to be in that realm. We'll see how Austin Simmons is in year 1, but that's what I'm most. We've talked about other teams breaking in a new QB, and we do know Ole Miss is talented everywhere else and has a lot of proven guys everywhere else. So we'll see. I think they're going to be one of those bubble teams.
Yeah, I'm not super high on Austin Simmons. I think they will be maybe closer to that 7-5 mark instead of 9-3, but they definitely could get in there with Lane Kiffin. They have a great coach, and who knows what'll happen from there.
And I think Ole Miss is also in that realm of. I had mentioned it with Miami with Mario. Those two have done well as head coaches and raised the bar a lot to the point where their fans now expect it. When are we going to get in the playoffs? It's one of those things they expect to do, and they're becoming impatient, I think, with not as much at Ole Miss as they are at Miami, but it's one of those things. It's when are we going to finally take that next step and make it in? Ole Miss might be another one who it might be 2026 when we're in year 2 of Simmons as a starter where they do it. But
that's what I think too.
They're going to be talented. A&M's an interesting one. So we have our Biscuits and SEC guys have their own show, and they're A&M guys. And there's I think there's a lot of uncertainty there. They feel like Elko is growing. Both they're a team who's prioritizing being tough, physical, playing good defense as his teams have done, and then being nasty both sides of the line. So we'll see with Marcel Reed. He's another guy, played a bit, but we're not quite sure what level he's at. A&M will be a fun team. Another team, a lot of people are picking Missouri to regress this year. I don't know if that's right or wrong. Drink's teams haven't really done that. He's been very consistent at Mizzou. They're bringing in Pribula, who was back up at Penn State at QB. They're bringing Ahmad Hardy, who will be one of the conference's better running backs. Of course, they lost Luther Burden, but I don't know what to expect out of Mizzou. Are they going to be 7 or 8 win team, or are they going to win 9 or 10 like they usually do with him? I don't know.
Yeah, that schedule is very workable with Missouri. That's the biggest thing.
Yep.
I'm not sure what their non-con is, but I know they get Bama at home. I think they got to go.
We have the border war coming back. Missouri plays Kansas this year non-con.
That'll be a fun game.
Yeah. So we're bringing that one back, and then I'm going to look at the rest of their non-con. I didn't think it was too difficult. FCS Central Arkansas, Kansas. Oh, they should beat Louisiana, the Raging Cajuns, though they're actually going to be one of the better G5 teams and did win their division last year. So
yes, they are.
Yeah.
And who's the fourth one? Probably like Western Kentucky or Louisiana.
It is, let's see, Central Arkansas, Kansas, Louisiana. Oh, UMass. Now in the MAC. So, nice. Okay, they'll win that one.
Yeah.
But Missouri's, like A&M, is one of those teams. I don't know what to expect. Yeah. We haven't talked about Tennessee yet. I think they regress a little. Aguilar coming in at QB. And beyond the Nico stuff and losing him, Tennessee was really good at 2 things last year. They ran the ball well with Dylan Sampson, and they had the best run defense in the country. They lost almost all of those guys. So it's even with Nico coming back, I think they were going to regress a little. Heupel's good. There's no other way to say it. He knows what he's doing. I don't know that they're a playoff team this year, though.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Look, you're losing the strengths of your team last year, and you're bringing in a new quarterback who wasn't here in spring practice. You have a guy that I don't think was amazing at Appalachian State. I don't think he's an SEC guy, plain and simple. Joey Aguilar. He turns the ball over way too much.
Right.
And I'm not sure if in that veer and shoot offense, he's going to make the right decisions enough. And I think the turnovers is just going to kill him.
They could. Yeah. So if you're picking 5 right now, who are you picking? I'm going to put you on the spot
Georgia,
for that.
Texas, Alabama, South Carolina are the pretty easy 4 for me.
Okay.
And again, I named a couple teams before. I just you're putting me in a tough spot here.
I am.
I want to say Florida, but that schedule, I don't know if I believe
I'm not. Yeah,
DJ Lagway.
I don't know that Florida even replicates what they did last year, just because the schedule's such a bear.
Yeah.
Lagway has to stay
15.
Healthy. DJ has to stay healthy for them to do that.
Yes, he does. I'll say LSU though for the 5th team.
Okay, fair. I like all of them. Georgia, Texas, Bama, South Carolina, LSU. Yeah, I like it. No problem with that.
Nice.
I would love to see the Gamecocks make it as a homer. Now we'll move on to our last P4 one before our hot take. We move to the Big 12, and looking at the betting odds for this conference, it is wild because there is no heavy favorite, but there's also nobody that has long odds to make the playoffs either. Everybody is really lumped in together, which shows how competitive it is, kind of like it was last year. I think there's a lot of decent teams here that have a good shot to make it, but there's probably not a title contender to win 4 playoff games either. I hate to say it, but that's how I feel about the Big 12. Right now,
it's a very deep conference. It feels like the ACC, if you got rid of Clemson, you just have a lot of teams that feel like they're in that 8-win, 9-win, maybe 10-win, if everything goes according to plan range.
But a lot of those 9 or 10-win teams, too, with bad luck, they're down to 7 or 8 wins. So there's a lot of teams in that realm. If I would have to pick 2, who would the 2 teams be to go to the Big 12 title game? If I was picking right now, I'd probably go Arizona State, Kansas State. Arizona State returns a lot. They were the conference champ last year. And Kansas State, Chris Kleiman always has them consistent, running the ball well, not making mistakes. They take care of their business pretty well. I think K-State's a team I wouldn't overlook. You could say the same about Iowa State. They're always consistent. They lost a lot, though. Like Iowa State. And then for me, one of the big unknowns is Texas Tech. They did great in the portal. They brought in all kinds of new guys. Baron Morton is coming back at QB. They did lose Taj Brooks. So I think they're one to look at. But if I had to pick 2 to go out now, I would say Arizona State, Kansas State. What are your thoughts Big 12-wise?
Yeah, I agree with you on Arizona State. I think that they are I'm going to say the second best team in the conference. The team that I think is the second most likely to reach the playoff. Kansas State's going to be good again. Iowa State's going to be good again. Those are 2 programs that I just see. They're almost a model of consistency, and that is so impressive knowing where those programs have been before. The second team for me, though, the number 1 team, in my opinion, you mentioned them a little bit earlier, Texas Tech. I am a huge believer in what they did in the transfer portal. Number 1 transfer portal class in the country for a reason. It is something that we haven't seen before in Lubbock. They have Baron Morton, who I think is a good quarterback. Joey McGuire is a very good head coach. They have a lot of talent on that roster. They are probably going to be more deep than everybody else in the Big 12. And I could see them honestly losing a game earlier on. Not sure what their schedule looks like, but they will play a pretty good team that they might just get tripped up somewhere. But as the season goes on, as other teams get banged up, we're not going to see that problem with Texas Tech as much. And they're going to finish out strong and probably win the Big 12.
Okay, we won't see that early in the year based on their schedule. They have FCS, Arkansas, Pine Bluff, Then their second game at home, the worst FBS team in the country in Kent State.
Kent State.
So, yeah. They do play Oregon State week 3 at home.
No, they're not losing.
I don't think Oregon State's going to be that good. So
I agree.
Yeah. Another portal guy I would like to mention for them, Dylan Wisniewski, who was a standout at FCS North Dakota State, one of their best players. Now, due to injury, he didn't play hardly at all last year. So, but before that, he was NDSU's best player. You know, they're one of the blue bloods of the FCS world. He was a massive get for Texas Tech. Will play strong safety and stud player. One of the teams in that conference I expect to be much improved is Utah. Whittingham is a fantastic head coach. They're not going to be as bad as they were last year. They can't be. They brought in Devin Dampier, QB from New Mexico. But why I bring them up, I think they're going to be improved, and I wanted to give them that. But Texas Tech at Utah is the first conference game, week 4. So that will be a big game, I think, for both of those teams.
Yeah, I agree. In addition to Devin Dampier, Utah added the New Mexico offensive coordinator, Jason Beck, who was once at Syracuse. Shout out him. He's a very good offensive mind. He brought out
former
the most
BYU guy. Played QB at BYU for those of you out there. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, he was a Bronco Mendenhall assistant for a long time as well. Brought out the most out of Syracuse in 2023, and he brought out the most out of Dampier last year. Give those two guys another year together and some more talent around Dampier, and I think that this Utah team will be pretty good.
One team I think will be better than they were last year, but not to this level, is Houston. Willie Fritz is a great coach.
Yes.
He took over. Holgerson wasn't awful, but totally different system that Willie's running there. I think they get better, but I don't think, especially with them bringing in Connor Weidman from Texas A&M, I don't think Houston is able to challenge for the conference this year, but I do think they get a lot better. Same with Kansas. They had a lot of injury problems last year. Leipold's a great coach. Kansas is going to be better this year.
Yeah, I agree with both of them. Houston, I think they could get to around the 7-5 mark. Yeah. Kansas, they lost a lot of close games. They beat a lot of very good teams, especially late in the year. There's no reason why they can't be back in that 9-3, 8-4 range with a lot of other Big 12 teams.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. So one thing we've ended our episodes on with this show is a college football hot take you might have, or not. It doesn't have to be, but a prediction under the radar, something that, you know, these people might not be hearing elsewhere. Ideally with an ACC take, but doesn't have to be. It can be whatever you want. So what is a take you have that may be under the radar or that may not be prominent at this point?
I'm going to say 3 ACC coaches are gone. 2 of them will be fired, and then we'll see somebody else leave for another job. 2 guys that I think are going to get fired is Brent Pry at Virginia Tech. I don't think Virginia Tech is going to be that good this year. Talked about the new coordinators. Philip Montgomery is a complete culture shock from what Virginia Tech has been doing, what their offense is built around. If he does continue with the veer and shoot, which I don't think he will. I think it'll be somewhat of a hybrid. I also don't think that hybrid is going to work out too well. Again, that schedule, South Carolina and Vandy, I think that's an 0-2 start to the season, and you're playing behind the 8 ball. I don't trust Brent Pry to win close games either. Moving on, I think Justin Wilcox is finally going to get the axe at Cal. He has been there for a while, and he has had a lot of losing seasons. I think this year he goes 4-8. There was a portal max exodus, especially in the spring. They lost all of their running back except one. So you have to fill those spots up very fast. You're losing Fernando Mendoza. You're losing a lot of good receivers as well.
Wilcox is entering year 8, and he hasn't had a winning season since 2019. That's where we're at.
That was his only winning season, or one of 2 winning seasons?
They were 7-6 the year before that. Those are the only 2. Yeah.
He's been mediocre to bad for so long, and you've seen a very empty stadium up in Berkeley. I can't imagine the Cal administration, even as much as they don't really care about football, they don't want to see that for much longer. And then finally, I think we're going to see a coach move on to a better job. A couple guys that I'm thinking, Rhett Lashley, we did talk about him a little bit earlier. Jeff Brom's another potential candidate, depending on the way things go. I think
the point we talked about for him is leaving his alma mater puts a different rent. Like that makes that one interesting.
It does, but he's a guy that I think he can get a pretty good to very good Big Ten or SEC coaching job. And if you get that, how much loyalty do you have?
Yeah. I have a hot take one there. So mine will actually spin off of what you were saying with coach leaving for a bigger job.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that this happens, but if Mississippi State has another awful year, then
could happen.
Jeff Lebby could. I think they give him year 3, but they only won 2 games last year. If they're only winning 1, 2, or 3 this year, Lebby could get it. Former D coordinator at Mississippi State, Manny Diaz, could be a guy they look for and could be a decent fit. I think for what he brings, playing aggressive D, the style he is, Manny would be a pretty good guy there who would be attainable, I think, for Mississippi State.
Yeah.
So he could be a guy that fits that bill if we're looking at guys to leave for a different job.
Yeah, I was thinking of Diaz as well. Didn't get a chance to say, Mississippi State probably won't.
Was the case, yeah.
Oh, you're all good. Mississippi State probably wouldn't fire another coach. They fired Zach Arnett after year 1, and that was very recent. Yeah. I don't think the boosters want to pay for a third head coach. So I think that Lebby does get another year, but Diaz is a guy that he could jump around to a bigger program.
Yeah. If we're looking at the odds, they tell us that Belichick is actually one of the most likely to be out of work too, which I don't know if that happens. That would probably have to be by his choice. But
yeah, not after year 1, I think.
No. I don't agree. I agree with you there. But another guy who they'd have to do better than they were last year, but I would be curious about Dave Doran because I could see the way he is, and he's a Midwest guy, if one of those schools would want Doran, and it wouldn't be a blue blood, but a somewhat lateral move after being there for a decade. Maybe you go somewhere else to restart the clock. I don't know.
It could be honest. I know,
but he's a guy who a lot of things would have to happen, but he's consistent anyway.
Yeah, and NC State is kind of getting over the consistency. I was thinking maybe they could fire him if it's a somewhat disappointing year. And he's a guy that I don't know if he would want to take a lateral move, but maybe give him 2 years sitting out, he'll reemerge somewhere else at maybe a Minnesota level job. Not saying PJ Fleck would leave, but whatever happens there, program like Minnesota.
Doran was a longtime assistant at Wisconsin. Fickle is not lighting the world on fire there. So who knows?
Right.
Yeah. The other place where Doran coached at for a long time, we were just talking about Kansas. If Leopold would A, take a better job, B, he's pretty old. So But Alec, thank you for being here.
Of course.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much for the invite.
Absolutely. Tell them again what your socials are, where they can find you before we leave.
Yes, so Twitter, Nederveld, NEDERVELD That would, again, be a little bit easier if that was in the description than trying to remember my weird last name. And then on YouTube, Shades of College Football. Again, new channel, starting it from the bottom, and I want to do some big things with it, and any support that I could get would be very greatly appreciated.
Is this correct?
Yes, that is right.
Okay. So that is Alec's Twitter handle. I will, of course, on Twitter, that will be tagged in everything. And then I'll have to write down and get precisely what your YouTube channel is to get that on there, but assured that will be done. I'll do that when we get off of the record here. But
all right.
Episode 5 is in the books. We talked about the ACC. Next week in week 6, it is looking like we will talk about the Fun Belt Conference moving on to the Sun Belt. So thank you all of you for being here. Alec, I appreciate you being